In case you've been living under a rock or having sex or whatever, you may have missed the Max Roll Pit leaderboard event. In any way, all the best gamers out there competed to claim the top pit clears. And in this video, we'll be taking a look at all of the best builds from this event in true copyright fashion. I've played a bunch of them and chatted up a few of the creators to know what the hell is going on with these builds, only so that you can all start playing the same best builds out there, because doing what everyone else is doing has clearly worked out so well in the past. Yeah. Starting off with rank number 10, I actually had to skip this one because I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. We do, however, had the Wind Daddy Druid build coming in at a respectable tier 120 here. And this is how high the Fat Wood Chopper will go. Yep, Fatty is having it rough out there. But I Boiled Her Up is making it work. So how does this machine gunner build work then? Well, it's rather easy and beautiful, really. Wind Fury has one aspect enabling this build, and it's the Calm Breeze aspect. Everything in this build is built around this aspect and stacking up as much poison damage as possible. This is done in a multitude of ways, but mainly via the Paragon board and a shit ton of attack speed. On top of that, it also takes advantage of staying at range. This both enables the build to not hecking die, but also to stack up a shit ton of multiplicative damage via the Thunderstruck legendary node, as much as up to 300%. So if you're looking for an easy-to-play and gear-for-build, which is coincidentally also pretty damn strong, then I definitely recommend this one. You'll find this one along with all other builds in the description. And next at rank number 9, we have the Rapid Fire Rogue build. The Rogue has 3 builds on this tier list, but this is the only one that is not bugged. This build works by scaling rapid fire along with a bunch of crit damage via the Precision Key passive. On top of that, the build received a new unique this season: Scoundrel's Kiss, turning rapid fire from a mediocre skill into an absolute beast. When I said this build didn't use any bugs though, I was lying, because Blizz keeps fucking up this unique, making it worse. In any way, this build is absolutely massive when it comes to dishing out damage, being able to burst for billions. It does, however, require you to actually aim, making it amazing for PC gigachads, but less so for the console cucks. Fortunately, it's never too late to buy a PC. A huge pro of this build is that it's insanely easy to gear for. The only thing you need is the Scoundrel's Kiss, and then you're ready to start blasting. It's also an absolute unkillable god, abusing the Umbrous aspect to stack up 70% damage reduction or so, slap on Aspect of Might on top of that, and you'll see why rogues are one of the tankiest classes this season. Coming in next, we have a Cringe Lord build, and it's no other than a minion build. What a surprise, huh? Yeah. I do, however, want to throw a shout out to Tofu Mord for producing an insane Bone Spirit build as well, in case you're not into the minion stuff, because this build was only 30 seconds away from me throwing away the Windshear build in the fucking trash. Alright, so minions. We're now getting into the insanity territory because this build managed to clear up to tier 127, so what makes the Shadow Mages insane then? Well, shit, son. The scaling, obviously. Not only does the minions inherit all of our stats, but the Cringe Lords are also able to abuse Skeletal Mage Mastery on 2 armor pieces, which are the best skill ranks for the Cringe Lords. So you're basically running around with 2 amulets on your armor. And on top of that, they even get Hellbent Commander on Amulet, which is also one of the best passives in the game. And if that wasn't enough, they even got some of the most insane Paragon nodes in the game. Namely, the Cult Leader Legendary node, granting a whopping 1.5 multiplier for free. Combine all of this, and you get the insanity that is this build. A massive pro of playing this build is also how insanely easy it is. You can basically sit in Blood Mist all day long if you choose to, or go jerk off or whatever, because your minions will do everything for you. Now next on the list is another amazing Necro build, the Golem Stonker. It also cleared a tier 127, but faster. The benefit of playing this build above the Shadow Mages are quite simple. It deals more damage. By having more legendary nodes and ways to scale the Big Daddy Golem, you'll see why. It does, however, have a massive downside to the Skelly build. It actually requires you to press a button, making you squishier. This is, however, no longer the case with the new nerfs to the pit damage, and is why I'd recommend playing this above the Shadow Mages. If the nerfs were in during this event, we would probably have seen a tier 130 clear here with the Golem, considering you'd be able to drop Blood Mist for Blight instead, granting 40% more Big Dam. Alright, that was all for the Cringe Lords and Fat Wood Choppers. Left on this build are only the most broken of builds, and the last one may surprise you because it's actually a Sorcerer build El Mao. But first, we have another Rogue build, and it's no other than Penetrating Shot. Now this is an amazing build. Not only my favorite rogue skill, but also hecking busted. In previous seasons, it was all about scaling crit damage, but in this season, it's instead abusing the Victimize Key passive. Now this passive is insanely bugged, but I wouldn't expect it to get nerfed until the next season. Joke's on me if it happens, Lamau. Anyways, it scales vulnerable damage and lucky hit chance to bust out insane amounts of Victimize damage, and considering Penetrating Shot has a respectable lucky hit chance of 50% along with high base damage, you see how it is able to dish out this many high damage Victimize. This build is definitely easy both to gear and play for, but it has a massive issue if you're trying to trade for the items required in this build. And that is due to the next build on this tier list, the Heartseeker build. Blasting an insanely respectable 134 clear, this build is goated as hell. The build works identical to Penetrating Shot. It even has the same lucky hit chance that Penetrating Shot has, but with one major change. Heartseeker is a basic skill, and basic skills have absolutely insane aspects to choose from. Being able to use aspects such as Moonrise and Adaptability, for example, just flat out quadruples the damage. So despite Heartseeker having a lower base damage than Penetrating Shot, it doesn't matter. The gear and aspects make up for it. Alright, that's all for the rogue builds. Next on the list are some shit-smelling barbarian builds, which is obviously why you're here. And coming in at a tier 135 clear, we have the Bash Barb. Now there are like a gazillion different Bash versions out there, but the highest clear was made by a Bleed Bash build. And why is this build so insane? Well, that's due to 3 reasons. First being the Bash Cleave temper. Now this temper is actually multiplicative and not additive, which is how it shows in-game. In true Blizz fashion, they obviously tried to shove this under the rug, which is coincidentally what people are buying on the forums as well. Yeah, man. I'm sure 1600 multiplicative damage was intended. You dumb fuck. Anyways, you have this, and then you have Gushing Wounds. The scaling of this thing can be done to absurdity, allowing you to stack up hundreds of millions in bleed damage by combining it with the Berserk Ripping passive. Now here's the fun thing though, you need thousands of crit damage to make this work, and to do this, you need to temper crit and vulnerable damage on a rogue character because Barbs doesn't have this temper. So I see 2 things happening. Either way, you can say Onara to this build in Season 5, or the crit and vulnerable damage tempers will be available for everyone. And the third thing Bash Barbs has going for them is the same as the Heartseeker Rogue, being able to use the most insane of aspects, stacking up hundreds of multiplicative damage from them alone. Yep, a pretty damn good build. And next is something you may not have seen previously, and that is the Flay Rupture Bar build. This build is similar to the Bash Bleed build, but instead of applying bleed via Bash and the Berserk Ripping passive, it uses Flay along with increased Flay duration. Now this is also the build you want to use if you enjoy seeing big hecking numbers because it combines the bleed with Rupture. First, stacking up billions of bleed damage and then busting all of that bleed via rupture along with its aspect, making sure that the bleed isn't removed. Definitely show this guy some love, defying the cringe meta and coming up with this insane build. Alright, so 2 builds left. And what do we have next? Hell yeah, it's the goated as fuck Thorns build. And why is it goated? Well shit son, because they're a legit tank. Rocking 500,000 life and relying on enemies hitting you, followed by them exploding. Now that is what I call hecking goated. The guy that made this build already made this during the Season 4 PTR and was one of the predicted best builds in the game. And oh man, we were not wrong there. So why is it that the shit-smelling barbs can do this and not other classes? Well damn my man, it's due to strategic challenging shout and the outburst passive. These are barb only, and is the reason barbs in particular are able to stack up way more thorns than any other class could possibly imagine. Along with these, the build also received massive buffs this season, namely via razor plate and being able to temper thorns everywhere. And if you're wondering why the man typically jumps around like a coked up beaver in most of his builds, then that is due to the rumble glyph. Doing this allows the man to stack up hundreds of multiplicative damage and then unleashing it via thorns. Okay, that's all the barb builds. And next on the list is a sorcerer build. Yeah, fuck me, right? I didn't believe it either. But it's Makuna cooking again, and that man knows his shit. There's a gazillion things to say about this build, and it's not entirely clear as to all the double dipping mechanics going on here. But to anyone seeing this and instantly going to work, trying to replicate the build, don't. The requirements for this particular setup is quite insane. He does, however, have different versions in his planner that isn't as ridiculous. Firstly, though, he achieved immortality via tempering flame shield duration, a ton of flame shield ranks as well as the hectic aspect. And one of the reasons this particular setup is insanely difficult to pull off is that he uses the raiment unique to pull enemies together. And by doing this, you lose a bunch of flame shield ranks and flame shield duration. The requirements to achieve immortality without this, however, are lower. But this was needed to push the 140 that is shown here. He even went higher than this though, and of recording this video he cleared a 147 alol. Pretty damn crazy. And to deal damage, the man stacks up a bunch of damage over time via Firebolt. When combined with the Flameweaver gloves, the damage becomes respectable. But that is not enough. It also uses the Shatter Key passive. Now, this thing apparently does a lot of double-dipping shenanigans, but it also has the added benefit of being a frost skill. And with this, also being able to scale different sources of multipliers in the Paragon board. The build is weird as hell, but I've tested it without the shatter shenanigans, and I can definitely recommend just the plain Immortal Firebolt setup. It's pretty damn cool, and you gotta love Makuna Man. That guy is goated as fuck. Anyways, that's all for this one. Hope you found something to play. See ya, Kings.